in the case of the Senate, a recess that's scheduled next week. Lindsey Graham was among the first Republicans to say to Chuck Schumer, who is, of course, the Senate Majority Leader, maybe we should stop that recess, make sure we're here just in case it's necessary. I want to raise that issue with Senator John Kennedy, the Louisiana Republican, kind enough to join us. Senator, what do you think of that idea? Don't take the recess next week. Be around just in case.
Well, I can't speak for my colleagues, Neil. All I can tell you is that when a deal is reached, and I think one will be, I'll be here to vote on it, rain or shine, night or day. On this issue, as most issues, I guess I'm an optimist who worries. I'm encouraged that President Biden and Speaker McCarthy are talking. They don't have to work together to solve this problem. They just have to work in the same zip code, and I think they're doing that. And whatever the president and the speaker can come up with, I predict, will pass both the House and the Senate with Republican and Democratic support. Now, that doesn't mean it will be unanimous. I don't know whether I'll vote for it because I don't know what it is yet. Yeah. But I think they'll come up with something.
You know, while I've got you, Senator, they're revealing, the portrait of Paul Ryan as a former speaker, of the House right now. And I'm just wondering, Paul Ryan, of course, has been a critic of the what he calls the severe rightward MAGA lurch of your party and the opposition role of Donald Trump in that party. And then there are others, I guess they're called rhinos, Republicans in name only, who are part of the same party. And there's always this Hatfield and McCoy is arguing back and forth. What do you think of that? Does it worry you? Paul Ryan is among those who says the Republicans will lose with Donald Trump. The direction is it has to be a little bit more mainstream to invite independents in. Any thoughts on any of that, Senator?
Well, I think both parties have factions. There's also a loon wing of the Democratic Party.
Which is the loon wing of the Republican Party?
Well, we have our factions as well, and I have some colleagues that may be loon-like, but I don't think we have a faction that is as extreme as the nauseously woke wing of the Democratic Party, but we can save that discussion for another day. I think whatever the president and the speaker come up with will pass. Now, you'll probably have a lot of Democrats and a lot of Republicans who won't like it.
Yeah.
But you'll have enough Republicans and enough Democrats who will say, we're going to pass it so we don't default on America's debt, and I think it'll pass. That's just my opinion.
You know, Senator, you mentioned the loon wings in each party. As you know, Democrats have been coming out and pouncing on your remarks regarding Mexico, in which you said, without us, the Mexicans would be eating cat food out of a can and living in a tent behind an outback. You also suggested the U.S. invade Mexico to subdue the drug cartels. Anyway, people like Robert Kennedy Jr. and others are coming out and saying that's crazy. That's going one step too far. What do you say?
Right. Well, I love the people of Mexico. I hate the cartels. And President Lopez Obrador, who is the president of Mexico, he ran on a slogan with respect to the cartels of hugs, not bullets. Well, that's not working out too well for him.
I think what they were referring to, what you said about the Mexicans in general without us, that they'd be eating cat food out of a can in a tent by now. I know you have colorful language, Senator, but you think that got too colorful.
What I said was that we should use, what I proposed to the head of DEA was that she and the president call the president of Mexico and ask if the American military and the American law enforcement can come into Mexico under the supervision of the American military, of the Mexican military and the Mexican law enforcement, and let us work together to eradicate the cartels, because we know who they are and we know where they are. And I suggested to the DEA secretary that we use America's economic leverage to try to convince the president of Mexico
No,
to do that.
that makes perfect sense the way you explained that to me. I guess what I'm asking you, sir, and not meaning to badger you on this point, but Robert F. Kennedy Jr. regrets the fact that some people might think you're related to him. He went that far. I'm just wondering, do you think the way you explained it to me just now would have been probably the better way to explain it?
Well, I think if you look at, first of all, I don't know Mr. Kennedy. He's entitled to his opinion. Number two, I think if you go look at my entire remarks, you'll understand the context in which I said it.
But Mexicans who feel that, you know, you went further than that to sort of malign all of them, you would say?
I would say that's not true. I love the people of Mexico, but I hate their cartels. And President Lopez Obrador needs to stand up to the cartels because they're poisoning our children. And I don't understand why he would not invite, and why, frankly, President Biden would not ask for it. He would not invite our military and our law enforcement personnel, to come into Mexico and work under and with his military and his law enforcement officials and let us try to wipe out the cartels. We know who they are. We know where they are. We know what they're doing. And then both countries would be better off because the cartels are crushing small business in Mexico through extortion, and they're killing Americans through fentanyl. And I think most fair-minded people know that what I just said is true. I think President Lopez Obrador knows that what I just said is true, but he is looking for a way to distract and from what I think is my logic to say, well, Kennedy is a racist. You know, everybody's a racist now, it seems. If we're all racist, nobody's a racist.
But you don't take back any of those other words, just to be clear. Your message was the message.
If you'll go listen, have you listened to the tape, to the entire remarks?
I have.
Well, then I think you'll understand, at least from my point of view, what I was saying and why I was saying it.
I don't. But that's just me. But Senator, thank you.
Well, you're entitled to your opinion too.
Absolutely, as are you, sir. But thank you very, very much. It's very good seeing you again. Senator John Kennedy, the Louisiana Republican.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.